Hey guys, welcome back to Goosejunkies. This is episode 5. We're happy to see you all again. We have a lot to talk about tonight. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting episodes we have done. We have camera horror with the iconic two franchises of kids horror going at it with Say Cheese and Die and the Tale of the Curious Camera. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. We have a special guest tonight and possible future ongoing panelists. We have the ultimate Goosebumps man. Why don't you say how you're doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited for this. Watched every
All
episode
right.
of the podcast so far, so.
Yeah, welcome on. We're glad to have you. And then we have our long-standing panelists, starting with Alex over at Goosebumps for Dummies. How are you doing tonight, Dummies?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Then we have BD Horror. How are you doing tonight, BD Horror?
Yo, people of the night, it's the person who catches you in 4K. That's right. I saw that Monster Blood 2 review. You gave it 9 out of 10. You thought I would forget. Nah, it's not slipping past me. I got the camera on tonight because we talking about camera horror. Get ready, y'all.
And last but not least, we have Minnesota Goosebumps fan. How are you doing tonight, Bruce?
Great. Hope everyone's doing all right, too. All
right. Very wholesome of you. All right. So we have a lot to discuss. I'm going to turn it over to BD Horror because Say Cheese and Die is a book that I think you said that you loved the first time reading it. And I just want to hear what you have to think about the book and what the book's about. And then we're going to pass it around and we're going to talk about this iconic Goosebumps story.
What's up, people? So Say Cheese and Die is probably one of the most iconic Goosebumps stories out there. And you can tell kind of by its influence because of, well, the casting choices they made for the episode. But for those who don't know, this story is basically about a kid named Greg and his 3 friends. They live in a place called Pitt Falls, and they have nothing to do around town. Basically get super bored. They're down in the pits. And then they basically stumble upon this house. Now, this house basically belongs to a guy named Spidey. It's abandoned, but everybody knows that he kind of runs around this house. He kind of owns it. Kind of a very mysterious homeless guy. He kind of has this scary reputation to him. And they kind of just want to eventually get into their curiosity, kind of check out his house, see what's going on. And as they do that, basically break in, as they're looking around in the basement, they happen to find this camera in this hidden compartment in the wall. And when they get it, Greg, being a photographer and loving photography, he gets the camera, takes a picture of his friend, and as soon as he does so, his friend falls off the staircase and injures himself. So right away, they kind of get freaked out. They help out their friend. And when he looks at the Polaroid picture that came out, it shows the picture of his friend falling down the stairs before the event actually took place. So right away, you get the idea this camera has more to it than meets the eye. And as the story unfolds, you figure out how dangerous this tool can really be in the hands of naive children. Now, what do I think about the story? As Completionist mentioned, I read this book for the first time, I think like a couple months ago, and I loved it. The main reason being because even though it's a supernatural object, the things that happen to these kids are very realistic. It's stuff that all of us have to watch out for in our daily lives because there's accidents that can happen to any of us. You know, this camera, you don't take a picture and it summons monsters or demons or transfers you to a different realm. No, your father can end up in a car accident if you take a picture of him. You could fall down the stairs and injure yourself. You could end up with concussions at a football game or baseball game you're at, or you could go missing completely. So these are all things that we have to worry about, and especially when you're a kid. Being a kid, you are at your most vulnerable state. You're weak physically, you're weak mentally, weak emotionally, and the world is a rough place, and you might end up in some terrible accidents. And I think I love that aspect of the story because it actually made me afraid and paranoid. And on top of that, I like the idea of having a cursed object, in which case you have to find out how to wield it. You have to know, should I give in to the chaos that it brings within, people's lives, or should I be more responsible? Should I get rid of it? And you have that dilemma going on throughout the story. I think Spidey is a pretty well done villain, all things considered. He's creepy. He's very kind of ominous. You do feel that kind of threat with him in the book. And I did like the ending involving the way he was taken out. It's pretty cleverly done, and I thought the story was overall very effective. Now, the episode, I think, is good, and I think it's a good episode. I think it's a fun one. Main shout-out point is the fact that Ryan Gosling is in the episode, which is huge. The man who plays Ken from the new Barbie movie, amazing. All right. However, the episode I think is a little bit more, I wouldn't say corny, but it's a little bit more goofy in certain parts. Spidey, he's got this incredible look to him, very iconic, and he plays up his role. He hams it up. You have the kids doing overall a good job, and they do actually show a lot of the stuff that's within the book. You have the car accident with the father, you have the falling off the stairs. However, they cut out some things. You don't get the concussion. The Shari going missing, that's kind of cut down a little bit. You get it, but it's kind of skimmed over. And then the ending is a little bit more hokey. It's not as cleverly done, in my opinion. It's still okay, effective, but I feel like they're trying to make the episode more fun, which is commendable, and I still think it's a good one, but not quite as good as what the book did. So, yeah, those are my thoughts, but I'd like to hear the rest of y'all's as well.
Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Ultimate Goosebumps Man. What do you think about Say Cheese and Die?
All right, so I am kind of started in my recent Goosebumps years with the channel and everything like that. I'm pretty much just reading through the books in numerical order. And as of right now, Say Cheese and Die is the latest book I have finished, and hopefully I'll get a review on that over Thanksgiving. But so far, that has been my favorite book. I just love the concept of it. It's so eerie, and just the fact that something so commonplace like getting a picture taken can result in something horrible happening to you is just such a unnerving situation, especially in like a modern society where we're so photo and picture reliant, and it's just kind of this idea of something happening to you because of a picture that always just kind of gravitated me towards it. I really like the characters, especially Greg. I think he's a great protagonist. And I think the third person, while I think the story would have benefited from a first person perspective from Greg, I think the third person perspective does a good job at bringing the story to life and still able to capture Greg's panic and fear during these situations and his kind of desperation to figure out what's going on. And just, I think it's really like that idea. I like how dark and grisly the book can get at times, especially with what happens to Spidey at the end, and just a lot of the stuff the camera does to these kids. And overall, I just think it's a pretty solid book overall. It's a good read. It was one of the ones that just went by really fast for me. Now, in terms of the episode, I like it a little bit less than the book. I still think it's a fun episode, but I think they just watered it down a little too much, which is obvious. I understand why, because that's just how it was with the Goosebumps show compared to the books, but I feel like they could have gotten away with a bit more than they did, especially with what happens to Spidey at the end, seeing they've gotten away with similar stuff in the show with episodes like Girl Who Cried Monster and Old Story. I feel like they could have done what they did in the book. And I think while Ryan Gosling is great, I think his acting is really solid overall. The other actors, in my opinion, are a little bit off. Especially, no offense to the actress, but the actress who plays Sherry had some really bad ADR throughout the whole episode, and that was just that bothered me. And honestly, I know Completionist in his review said he liked the episode's design of the camera. I personally do not like it, because like throughout the whole episode, all of these people are saying like, "Oh, sweet, a camera," when they see this thing, and it's like, what? Who in their right mind would look at that thing and think it's a camera? That's always kind of bothered me. I think it's a cool design and it's iconic, obviously, but I kind of prefer, as bad as the show is, I prefer what they did with the look of the camera in the Disney Plus show.
Yeah, I will say this. There is a lens on that camera. There is a slot. There are some glowing lights. So it's not like too far out of the realm of the possibility to believe it's a camera. Maybe you could think it's a stereoptic telescope. I don't know. But yeah, it is an acquired taste, I would say. So yeah, great thoughts. So I'm gonna pass it over to Minnesota Goosebumps fan. What do you think about Say Cheese and Die?
I'm just gonna be very honest here. I'm extremely biased towards this book, as it was the first book I ever read in Goosebumps. Well, actually, I didn't read it. My mom read it to me when I was 7, right after seeing the Goosebumps movie. So, as you can expect, it is one of my favorite books. I actually just read it recently, I think in June. So, my thoughts is that it is the third best Goosebumps book, like third favorite for me. And I love all of this very serious moments in it. It actually poses a threat that I think some books, like literally just the one before it, Monster Blood, doesn't have too much of one besides just having it grow. But they should have just left that thing alone anyway. The camera, I can admit, yeah, they should have left it alone. Why are they going in this weird guy's house anyway? But something is just so charming, and that actually just leads me to the episode. It's also my favorite Goosebumps episode, and I'll tell you why. Now, if there is an episode, this is a terrible reason to say it is my favorite, but it is so corny and so just like, what? It's so like, what? Like, Like, I actually want to talk about what Ultimate Fan here says. The camera does not look like your regular camera. It's like the Masked Mutants version of a camera. You get me? It's really weird, and it's like, I actually have to agree with him here. It's like, yeah, wait, what? That doesn't even, I guess, yeah, the flashing lights, but it doesn't look like a camera. It looks like a toaster. And I'm pretty sure actually one of the characters says that. So
Yeah.
It really shows that I feel like they had some random crap lying around. Or if they didn't, I actually want to give even more props because it's just so, like, loving because of it. If it was just a normal camera, yeah, it was cool, I guess. But it just, like, adds on to the whole thing. And then you get those, like, super close-up shots of Ryan Gosling's face. It's like, it's great. I love it. Favorite Goosebumps episode. One of my all-time favorite books, too. And it still holds up, in my opinion. Even though Polaroids are way out of, whatever you want to call that, out of picture nowadays. It's all about phones. But, oh yeah, there you go.
It's more about aesthetic now, I would say.
Yeah.
All right, let's pass it over to Alex. Great thoughts, by the way, Minnesota. Alex, what did you think? What do you think about Say Cheese and Die?
I hate it so much. I can't stand it. Not one bit. Is what I would say in an alternate universe. I love this book all around. Basically, everything about the book was either good or very well done. I like specifically lots of the scenes in here. There's this one scene near the climax where Pacific villainous characters chasing Greg and Sherry down the street. And I think that was very realistic. It could have been taken another way. I get what Stein was trying to imply. It was very, very, very nerve-wracking, since that is a more realistic scenario, as Ultimate Goosebumps was saying, with the more realistic scenarios going on in the book, like people going missing and stuff. I do believe that is my favorite scene in the book as well, so props to that scene. I like all the characters, especially Sherry. She really brings the book out for me. I like all the things the camera does to the kids, specifically the one at the softball game or where the hell it was. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I like about the book, revolving around the camera and Spidey specifically, especially the ending. The sort of ending right before the actual twist, which twist should have led into the sequel. The sequel's terrible. Yeah, basically everything about this book was really really well done, and I had a fun time reading it. Now, the episode. I get what Bruce is saying. I do like the corniness factor a little bit. I kind of like some of the scenes in there, but a lot of people wouldn't like maybe the cop scene. I don't know if that's like a controversial thing, but I like that scene. I like the scenes with anything near the climax. I thought that was all pretty good. I like the camera's design. I thought it was very weird, but it looked straight out of the 90s since everything was really weird that back then anyways. Yeah, I liked a lot of stuff about the episode, but it doesn't beat the book for one reason, and that is because there's not as much camera scenes. I get that it's a 20-minute episode and they got to cut it down, but like I really like the camera. I'm happy it got 2 sequels. But yeah, I wish there was a bit more of the camera. And also, the ending of the episode wasn't exactly great. The twist ending. It was similar to the book in some ways, but kind of not. In 2 ways, since there's kind of 2 twists in the book and the episode near the end. Yeah, I thought the book did it a lot better than the episode.
Okay, great thoughts. So I guess I'm gonna have to be the person to beat Say Cheese and Die over the head a little bit. All right, so here's the thing. All right, y'all said some great points, right? I do think that, starting with what Ultimate Goosebumps Man said, for it being a third-person Goosebumps book, you hardly see those done. You maybe see them more in earlier books, but as the years have gone on, they get harder and harder to find. I think the newest one I can think of maybe was, I don't know if the most recent one was like this, but I definitely know that like Here Comes the Shaggity was third person. So you don't really get that style of writing from Stein in this series hardly. So when you do get it, and when you read something like Say Cheese and Die, it's kind of interesting to see how he builds characters. And one thing I noticed in Say Cheese and Die is that he often builds with monotony, and he'll set these kids up doing basically nothing and just bantering with each other for 3-4 pages before actual events start happening. And that adds up and adds up throughout the book. All right, but when you do get to the good stuff in Pitt's Landing, when they're going to Spidey's house, for example, that stuff, it is kind of creepy. You're seeing the dwellings of an unknown person. You imagine being a kid. You're going through the thrill of living dangerously a little bit. So Stein's approach with these kids, you have Michael, you have Bird, Sherry, Greg. They're just looking for some thrills, being bored like normal kids would be. And that plays into everything after they acquire the camera, running away from Spidey, trying to keep it a secret. They look at it from like a disbeliever would, right? They look at the camera and say, hey, maybe this isn't supernatural. And they all kind of question it. And some people want to, come after the characters for being dumb. Like, hey, how can you not see that this camera is causing this to happen, predicting this to happen, whatever the case may be? They're just being real. And it's realistic things and thoughts that protrude through these kids. And what happens in the story, very predicated on realism. You have, the car accident with the father. You have, Bird getting hit in the head with a baseball, getting knocked out. You have Sherry. Well, I don't know if Sherry just disappearing out of thin air is realistic, but that can't happen. People can disappear. And the emotions Greg feels is raw. I mean, when Sherry goes and disappears and all that stuff adds on, you feel those emotions with Greg. And I think that's where the book really shines. And it builds up to this climax, right? And the climax is probably one of the most metal things in Goosebumps history in terms of books, because we have a body count. A body count. Well, technically, if you look at what Greg and Sherry, who are the characters involved with the climax, right? They weren't really responsible, but they kind of were. And given the stipulation of the book, where you can just rip up photos and erase what happened, you would think that they maybe would have done that out of, to be decent humans, but they didn't do it. So what makes you think, right? And that leads into the sequel, and why the sequel's so crap. It's because they forget all this happened. Well, that's another day, right? So the book, right, it has its issues for me. The camera really isn't explained. Is it predicting bad futures, or is it just causing bad things to happen? Can it will things to happen? Like with Sherry, for example, she's the biggest outlier to all the other events. The camera makes her just disappear, and Greg rips up the photo, she reappears. How's that happening if it's predicting bad futures? That's what I'm saying, right? Vagueness there. And I do think that, Michael, who is, Michael and Bert are probably some of the more annoying characters I've had to deal with, which I really like in the episode because they got rid of Michael. They put Bert pretty much in Michael's shoes, everything that Michael goes through. And I think the episode, we've already talked about with the camera, how it looks futuristic. I think Bruce said looks like looks like the Mass Mutants camera. I think it's cool, you know, in a '90s kind of way. I think it's charming, you know. It's more believable to me that camera is indestructible than, you know, a regular Polaroid camera. I'm gonna be like, you mean to tell me that you smash a Polaroid camera and that's not gonna break? Those things are made out of like plastic and like maybe cheap metal.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but Ryan Gosling, great acting. I like that we actually get to see the cover, right? The dream sequence that's barely mentioned in a paragraph of the book, and Greg like passively talking about it with Sherry. We actually get to see that unfold. Now, I will say those skeletons in the episode are drawn on, and that is cheap. That is very cheap, right? We're talking shoestring budget here. Spidey's lair is a warehouse instead of a house this time, and Spidey's lair was creepy. Got to give it to Richard McMillan too. Richard McMillan sent it home with Spidey. I will say that Spidey is one of my favorite TV show villains because he's so eerie. And those whispers that he does is so creepy. Like, say cheese, like stuff like that. You get it more in Say Cheese and Die Again, but I like that stuff. Right? And I actually like the twist at the end of the episode, the new added feature, because if the camera is going to have willy-nilly powers, why not have it to have the ability to suck people into a camera? Right? Who cares at this point? You know? And I think having Spidey live on potentially with the ending kind of makes it better for sequel bait. That's just my opinion. Now, it is not as dark as the book. There are some give and takes. You streamline some events that seem kind of egregious for Greg in the book, like having to willingly bring the camera to the baseball game, knowing this camera is doing some weird stuff, willingly bringing the camera to Sherry's birthday party, knowing the camera is doing this stuff. You cut that out and just have Greg happen to have the camera as this stuff is happening. So it's more fate of circumstance. I like that a little more. I think it's more streamlined. Yeah, it's kind of goofy, but I think that charm speaks a lot more to me. And I prefer the episode, if I'm being honest. But that's not taking anything away from the book, which was a childhood favorite of mine. It was one of the first 5 books I ever read. I'm sorry I've gone on for so long. But yeah, I have a lot to say there. So anybody want to add anything else before we read off Spongy's thoughts?
Yeah, I actually was kind of wanting to bring up just some like minor like things, like just the little things in the episode that always like crack me up. There are so many, like, especially some moments with Ryan Gosling that are just unintentionally hilarious. Like the way he just runs down the stairs and his hands are just flopping at his like in front of him as he's walking down. Like nobody walks downstairs like that. But I've always found that scene hilarious, as minor as it is. And there's just other things like, I don't know, some of the facial expressions Spidey makes are pretty funny. Like at the end when he pops up and has that little smile.
Yeah, I always thought that was kind of creepy, but also kind of funny in the same way. Like he's like, you know, I'm free, and he wasn't really in the camera all that long, so I guess he's happy. So
or just kind of like how like in the book when what happens to Spidey happens, it's unintentional, but in the episode Sherry just like heartlessly just poses the photo and intentionally takes the picture of him without like a second thought.
I kind of like that though. You know, I like that they went that angle. I do think that you know, I do agree with you. They could have probably done the death scene at the end, but the thing is, like in the Goosebumps show, the people that died deserved it. And it's kind of like walking a tightrope with Spidey. Did Spidey deserve it? And, you know, we're getting into the whole Justice for Mortman hashtag controversy, too, with Girl Who Cried Monster. Did Mortman deserve it? Well, that's another topic for another day. But, I mean, maybe they thought that maybe this guy didn't do anything wrong. So it's not really right to do that. But, yeah. Anybody else want to add anything?
I want to give a shout out to the biggest celebrity in the episode, which is not Spidey, not Ryan Gosling, is the bully character. Because that guy was in 2 Dark episodes, as far as I know. He was in Laughing in the Dark and another one upcoming very, very soon. So shout out to that guy. He pops up a lot and stuff.
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is that there's so many similarities to this. We'll get into that in just a minute. But, like, from the director to certain actors that are both in Say Cheese and Die's episode and in Curious Camera. It is almost uncanny how that actually happened. I wonder how somebody would think like, hey, Ron Oliver did this story over in Dark. Let's have him adapt this Goosebumps book that came before the Dark episode. It's kind of weird. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and read off Spongy, and then we'll get into what we think about the Say Cheese and Die episode and book, and which ones we think are better as a vote.
Let's pull up Spongy's thoughts. Give me one moment. Okay, so he's gonna talk about both the first book and then the episode. Say Cheese and Die book. There's plenty to appreciate here. There's some good scary moments with the camera and the aftermath. When Shari vanishes, there's some sobering moments that make it feel realistic. On the flip side, it does feel padded, with the characters not having much motivation to use the camera. Spidey is interesting, but is too sympathetic to feel like a villain, and his death was a bit cruel, lol. I just think it's decent overall. For the episode, compared to the book, some of the darker, sobering moments are lessened, but it's balanced out by some solid atmosphere. It feels tighter with the characters, feeling a bit smarter. You get some weird moments like with the cops too. Spidey gets sucked into the camera, felt like a better finish to me. A few clunky bits, I think it's good. And those are his thoughts for both adaptations.
Okay, so Spongy would say that the episode is better. And I know that's going to be probably the unpopular opinion with this panel, but we have one vote for the episode. I guess I'll share mine. I have to agree with Spongy here, if only for this. If I look at the episode, it depends on what I'm in the mood for. If I want to read those scenes in the book, I'll read them. But for the episode, I just like it to turn it on. It's a quick 21 minutes. It's fun. I think it definitely has more atmosphere to me than the book does. And I can vibe with it. With its open flaws and everything. Sherry's not the greatest actress. There are some goofy bits involving the camera. Bird, he's obviously not actually Bird from the book. He's Michael. They just changed his name. But I have to give it to the episode. But I'm gonna pass it over to Alex. Alex, which one do you think is better?
The book. There's a lot more going on in the book, especially since it's longer, obviously. It's a longer read. And there's more time to flesh out the characters and the scenes that go down that were actually in the episode. And just there's more content in the book than the actual episode. And it's a more enjoyable experience overall, in my opinion.
Okay, so we have another vote. 2 for the episode, 1 for the book. Bruce, what do you think about which one do you prefer?
Oh, that's a hard one. The episode. The book is really good, obviously, like I said. But like Alejandro says here, it's when you read, like, it's one of those, like, in the first 10 Goosebumps books, you got some very long ones in there. Like, I'm pretty sure one of them's like 140 something. So yeah, some longer reads for sure. And I'm pretty sure this is where it all started to, like, go way up in page count. So if I was just to, like, pick up one right now, like the DVD to Say Cheese or the book for Say Cheese, I'd have to say the DVD. I love the episode. It is, once again, it's just like, it's the best Goosebumps episode in my opinion. The book, I'm not going to say it's boring at all, but it has its moments where it's definitely slower. So cut those out. But there's also moments that are like, yeah, I wish I could, like, read the whole, like, highway scene instead of watching the highway scene. Or I wish I could read the whole... You get the point. The book is more fleshed out, but the episode just has something for it. It barely wins. These are both on par, basically, but I'm going to have to say the episode.
Okay, so we got 3 for the episode, 1 for the book. I'm going to pass it over to BD Horror. BD Horror, which one do you think is better?
I think the episode did a better job in terms of having a more streamlined story, so it's more of a coherent story, more in line. But I think the book's content is better because to me, just to bring up like the whole camera thing, like I understand that it has an iconic look and stuff, but there's something more effective to me where it looks like an ordinary camera and an ordinary object having all that power within it. I think that's a nice contrast that makes it more effective to me. While as in the episode, it looks like I'm looking at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Equipped spell card. Like it looks like some Mighty Morphin Power Rangers equipment. Like I cannot take it seriously. Like a guy taking, especially shout out to Ultimate Goosebumps fan. I didn't think about that. You imagine this kid walking around with this giant brick in society. Like, how is nobody raising any red flags to this thing? Like, this looks like Dracula's camera. Like, I mean, I get it's iconic, but it kind of threw me off a bit. I like the baseball scene in the book involving, the kid getting knocked out, and just the description of his neck being bent at an odd angle is so disturbing to me, especially considering I've seen friends and family get injured in terms of sporting events and stuff growing up. That hits home for me. So that scene getting cut out, kind of takes away from it. The whole car accident, I think, is done better in the book. And again, I like the ending. The whole ending to the book is really creepy to me because, yes, I agree. If the camera has all these powers, you can expand on it. But at the same time, to me, the camera capturing souls and sucking in people makes it even more complicated, and it would probably confuse the watcher even more as to what the powers are. But having Spidey not die from the actual camera, but die from fright, die from a heart attack because he was so afraid of what this thing that's basically, you have to understand, Spidey admits that this camera in the book has killed all of his loved ones, all the people that are close to him. This camera is the reason they died. So when he gets his picture taken and he gets a heart attack from that, I think it's super effective. So I have to give it to the book. The book, I think, is a little bit ahead. Episode's still good. Book wins.
See, I get what you're saying, but like where I think about it, right, is like if we actually got like a true Spidey sequel, which I don't think we actually did, if I'm being honest. I mean, look what happens. Hold on. Alejandro.
Still
Think we're good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, we're good?
Yeah.
Smack go.
Alex,
What?
mute your mic.
All right. So, like I was saying. Nope.
Jeez.
All right, there we go. All right. So like I was saying, I think that the ending to the episode, it could have been better, to expand on for like a Say Cheese and Die Again. You have Spidey there, potentially alive. You can maybe go into Spidey finding out, because it's just to be implied, because of the book's ending, he never really figured out that you can rip up these photos. Because if he did, he probably could have fixed a lot of the tragedy in his life, and it wouldn't have been as scary to deal with, right? If that's the cop-out. So it's implied he didn't know that. But in Say Cheese and Die Again, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but Stein just chose to go like, hey, the camera can alter people's appearance now. So if we're going to have all these different powers, why not, have Spidey get sucked into the camera, live on, and then we can have him be involved somewhere else. That's just how I thought. I've always thought that, like, that element in the book, it is metal. I mean, straight up, having a character die, dark, I will always tip my hat to Stein and Goosebumps when they do dark things. But I kind of like having Spidey there, even though, like I said, Say Cheese and Die does absolutely nothing with it. I dig it.
Yeah, I'll give you credit. If Spidey took over the camera, it would be a little bit similar to the next thing we'll talk about. So yeah, maybe it could have worked.
Yeah, and I'll turn it over to Ultimate Goosebumps, man. So we have 3 for the episode, 2 for the book. What do you think is better in Say Cheese and Die?
For me, I prefer the book. I think that, again, now my rating may change as I read more Goosebumps, but as of right now, that has been my favorite book I've read. And so it's kind of left me on a really big high at the moment. I haven't really come down from yet. But I think there's just a lot of really dark and creepy elements in the book that just work really well and are much more effective. I like the episode a lot, but again, I just think it's very watered down, very goofy. And while it works in some scenarios, when they try to adapt the more serious scenes from the book, it just doesn't play off as well, in my opinion. Yeah, that's basically all I gotta say.
All right. So we have a tie. I guess the tiebreaker would be, what do we all think is the scarier version? I think that would be the fair thing to do. If I'm being honest, I'm going to give it to the book for being scarier. And I think everybody would agree here that the book is a bit scarier, less. It's less campy and goofy, and I think that's a fair thing to give it to the book as the winner. The winner here. All right. You got an echo again. All right.
Should I just leave and rejoin?
Yeah,
you come back.
Jeez.
All right. So we have the Say Cheese and Die book being the representative going into the versus, the face-off, right? Which is the Tale of the Curious Camera, which I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all what the story is about, essentially. You have Ron Oliver, who directed Say Cheese and Die's episode, directing this episode before he directed that episode, but this episode came out after Say Cheese and Die's book. So there's a weird history going on, and Ron Oliver chose Richard McMillan to play this yearbook photographer in this episode, who went on to play Spidey later on. And the redheaded bully, one of Greg's bullies from Say Cheese and Die, is actually the bully to the main character in this story. So there's a lot of symmetry going on, right? So this story has Eddie K. Thomas. He's famous for the American Pie films. He is the main character. He has a yearbook photographer coming to take pictures. His bully squirts ketchup on his face, ruins his photos. He tries to go talk with the yearbook photographer to get his photo retaken, but the yearbook photographer refuses to do so and instead gives him a camera. And the main character uses this camera throughout the episode and realizes that the camera, whenever he takes a photo of something, that thing ends up breaking or malfunctioning. Something is bad is going to happen to it. And as the story goes along, he starts off with objects. He tries to get rid of it, but the camera seems to be following him. He realizes that he could possibly use this on his bullies, get some revenge, and there's some contemplation there. But once his sister gets involved, the situation gets a little dire. He realizes he has to try to fix it by giving it back. But there's more to the camera. The camera might have chosen him instead of him just being given it. And he has to find a way to get rid of it and save his parents, because his parents have gotten a photo taken of them. So there's a lot of stakes going on. And there's even a twist involved with what's inside the camera. And you don't see that coming. But I think it's a very well-told story. So I'm going to pass it around, and I'll tell my thoughts later. I'm passing it over to Ultimate Goosebumps Man first. What did you think about the Tale of the Curious Camera?
So this was actually like my first main introduction into Are You Afraid of the Dark? I've seen clips and I've read synopsis and reviews and stuff like that here and there for some of the bigger episodes, like Laughing in the Dark and Dark Music and some of those ones. But this was the first episode I actually sat down and just watched all the way through. And it was pretty solid. I enjoyed it for the most part. I think that the main character, I can't remember his name, but I think he had very good motivations. I think he was more interesting to follow than Greg, if we're strictly comparing the episodes. I just think that he was a bit more of a sympathetic character because of the bullying aspect, and I can relate to that since I was bullied a lot growing up. So I feel like there's just a lot of sympathy towards him, and some of the stuff he does, specifically when he takes the picture of the bully and what subsequently happens, and his kind of contemplation as to following through with this picture, I can kind of, it's relatable when you have a bully. It's always wanting to contemplate the idea of, doing something bad to make them feel what they make you feel like. And I feel like that aspect of him, it just makes it really intriguing. I did not see the twist coming with what happens with the camera and kind of how it manipulates and affects the environment. And I think it works better than Say Cheese and Die accomplished. And I do think that, I think his name is Richard McMillan. I think he does a better job in this episode than he did in Say Cheese and Die. And I just think, I don't know, he was very fun and energetic and just entertaining, especially in the later half when he goes to return the camera and when he's on the phone call, and just, it's just a very enjoyable, hammy performance that I just think he sells really well. So yeah, I thought it was an overall pretty good episode.
All right, great thoughts. I'm gonna turn it over to Alejandro. What did you think about the Tale of the Curious Camera?
So, like I have always done, I've always watched these episodes beforehand, at some point in my life. And this one, I remember hating once again, just like last time. So, I didn't have as low expectations because I knew a lot of people liked this one, and it was a long time ago. It was like 3 years ago since I last watched that one. So I went back into this one expecting it to be just okay, and it mostly was. But I was a little bit surprised by how much I enjoyed it. The twist with the camera, first of all, with what's inside of it, was something I did not see coming at all. But I really liked it. It was very similar to something from Gremlins 2. But that was strange. If y'all know what I'm talking about, literally. Yeah, it was very strange to see that in there, and it was way different from Say Cheese and Die. Definitely a unique take there. And the camera does the exact same stuff that Say Cheese and Die does. Take a picture, it shows what happens in the future, or predicts the future, makes the future, whatever the camera does anymore. And yeah, it was overall just more Say Cheese and Die, but with different motives for the main character, as in getting back on his bullies instead of using it just for fun, not really knowing the power of it. And of course, the episode goes on, he slowly learns more, and I really enjoyed the pacing of this episode. It took it slow. It didn't tell us what the camera was about until later. That there was a little thing inside of there. What the camera was doing. And the power of the camera. Especially towards the end, you can see it more, and I enjoyed how more powerful the camera felt in this this story, more than Say Cheese and Die, because it was a lot more powerful since it could do a lot more than the Say Cheese and Die camera. So I'm sorry I'm comparing this to Say Cheese and Die, but it's like they're almost identical. Yeah, it was obviously heavily inspired by Say Cheese and Die, and that's what makes me enjoy it a lot. Since of course Say Cheese and Die, the camera is iconic. But I like the unique twist they did with the camera. Enough talk about the camera. Of course, the characters, like I already said, the main character has different motives than Greg, and I really liked his motives. I liked the character too. The acting for most of the characters was just okay or questionable at times, but mostly okay. The guy who's basically the Spidey in this universe is a lot more enjoyable than Spidey was in the actual episode of Say Cheese and Die, in my opinion, of course. I thought he was very well acted, and the guy playing him actually got into the role very well. Yeah, enjoyable characters overall. I really like the camera and everything they did with it. The overall story is overall pretty good. A lot more interesting than Say Cheese and Die, even if it is still probably gonna win, or at least better in my opinion. Yeah, definitely a surprising one. I really enjoyed it.
All right, great thoughts. Next, I'm going to turn it over to BD Horror. What do you think about the Tale of the Curious Camera?
So obviously I binged half of this show, and surprisingly, as popular as this one is, this was not an episode I binged before, so this is actually the first time I ever saw it. And it's actually funny because this is actually in my top 10 now. I actually really, really enjoyed this episode. And the biggest things that I got to give it in terms of credit, first of all, no bad acting. Shout out to Are You Afraid of the Dark for that. There's no bad acting in this episode. They went from Goodwill and Salvation Army to Trader Joe's. Got better talent. And then on top of that, I think this main character is more relatable and more interesting than Greg is, as Ultimate Goosebumps Man mentioned. You have a kid who's basically getting bullied, and I especially love the scene where his picture turns out invisible, and in this case, Richard McMillan, basically his character, tells him, the camera doesn't lie. It shows you what the truth is. This is what you are. You're invisible to the rest of society. I was like, whoa, that is pretty good imagery right there. No pun intended. That was well done. And I like the fact that you have this invisible kid finding a way to get revenge, getting this power in his hands. You see him actually tamper with the camera and start figuring it out by using it on everyday objects that would not actually hurt anybody. And then he transforms into actually hurting people who wronged him. And this is also an incredible thing I have to give Are You Afraid of the Dark. And to put it bluntly, there is like this school shooter basically type of scene where this kid, after using it on his bully, gets a picture, a yearbook picture of his class, takes a red marker, and starts putting X's on the people who've wronged him. And he starts deciding, like a moral judge, nah, this person doesn't deserve it. No, this person has harassed me. I'm going to target them and take a picture. Not school shooting and all that kind of stuff, very dangerous. Mental health is a big thing. But just the fact that they had the guts to show something like that involving his object, I think it adds layers to his character. I agree with Dummies and Ultimate. I think Richard McMillan, even though he's not as iconic as his Say Cheese and Die role, I think he does a good job because I think the idea that the fact that this camera has ruined 20 years of his life and now he's selfishly giving it away to another person to just free himself, that kind of adds more layers to his character compared to a deranged scientist chasing after it. And I think the story does a better job. I think it's more well told. In Say Cheese and Dies, it's like a game of hot potato while a crackhead's chasing you. Here it's actually more well thought out. You have a character who's invisible. He gets the power. With great power comes great responsibility. And you get a better, villain figure in this case. And then the Gremlin. What a great twist. I did not see that coming. I have to agree with you guys completely. I love the fact that it's not actually a monster. It's like a little logo that's in each picture, and they have to bring together all the pictures and do detective work and find it. And the fact that this thing is like, I don't know what you call it, a technopath. It can switch between gadgets. And basically, even if you destroy the camera, which in this case, it can be destroyed, it'll move to your TV screen. It'll move to a video recorder. It'll move to a computer. So you're not safe. And that actually justifies why this thing has strange powers. Because at first you would think, oh, it's going to be some more black magic stuff. No, it's a deity, a creature that's haunting these people through these ordinary objects. And I think that's well done. So shout out to the episode. It's going to get a 9.2 out of 10. Fantastic. I thought they did a great job. And yeah, I absolutely loved it.
All right. Yeah. And I guess I'll share my thoughts before we get into Spongy and Bruce. I agree with a lot that you said. I mean, I gave the episode about a 4.6 out of 5, which is about the same score. Which that it's considerably higher than Say Cheese and Die. I might be going ahead and giving it away, but I think this is what Say Cheese and Die should have been. Honestly, the main character played by Eddie K. Thomas is more relatable. He's kind of like a Ricky from Calling All Creeps. He's invisible, but you understand why he's invisible. Now, there is some clunky things, like, was the camera the guy using for the yearbook photos, was that the same camera he ended up acquiring, or is that just a random camera? Because if so, why does his photos turn out invisible? What does that have to do with anything? Second thing, I will say this. It is kind of tame compared to Say Cheese and Die's book. Say Cheese and Die was not afraid to mess up some kids, okay? Now, I'm going to be honest. If that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for violence, Say Cheese and Die is going to be that for you. You're not going to get that here more so. You do get that one scene with the bully with the locker room crushing his leg. That was pretty intense. That's about it. But the implications here, I think, are stronger than Say Cheese and Die, because I feel like you feel more connected to this character than you do Greg. I'm sorry for fans of Greg Banks out there, but he's not really that connectable. I mean, he does have his moments of great emotions in the book, and you do feel sympathy for him and all the things that he's been going through. But with Eddie K. Thomas's character, you do feel that moral struggle he's going through. Like, he tries to throw away the camera. The camera keeps coming back, better than ever. He can't get rid of it. It's chosen him. It's kind of like an omen. So he has to go with it. And he's like, well, maybe I can use this to my advantage and get some revenge on people who have wronged me. And that makes him more of a layered character than Greg ever was, in my opinion. And I think that his sister being involved shows, that he's willing to be heroic and save his sister. He tries to, look into it. He tries to give the camera back. Like he has moments where he tries to be better. And then he messes up with his parents and has to fix that. And he's pretty on his feet, quick to think of some ideas, comes up with a great idea, and we get to see some really fun stuff in that climax. I mean, seeing the camera, the gremlin move to the camcorder, that stuff was fun. I thought that was intense. I was like, this is something up my alley. I love electropathic stories. And I think the cliffhanger stinger ending with the computer was pretty well done. Good sequel bait. I mean, all around great story with hardly any flaws. And yeah, Richard McMillan, I think I agree with y'all. Spidey is more iconic, okay? But his performance in this episode as the yearbook photographer was so great and so hammy. Oh my Lord, he was so funny. He's acting like he's like a big shot on the cell phone, and he's like he's got a girlfriend now, and like he's living up in the lap of luxury. Good for him. I love that character, and I think it's a really cool idea. And I'm shocked how well I enjoyed this one. This might be in my top 15 favorite Dark episodes. So yeah. With that being said, Bruce, do you want to go now, or do you want to read off Spongy first?
I'll go. I'm just gonna say basically I agree with everything here, but I'm surprised about what you guys said about Say Cheese and Die. I definitely prefer Say Cheese and Die book and episode over this. I think this is still pretty good though. Probably the best episode we've watched as of comparing the two with my bias, I can't get past it. I love Say Cheese and Die, and this is very obviously in my eyes just a ripoff.
Okay. All right, that's fair. And let's read off Spongy what his thoughts are on the Curious Camera before we get into a vote of which one is better.
All right, let me pull it up.
Dark might have his chance here.
All right, Curious Camera. Actually, this is probably much longer than the other one, so it's good. I mostly like how swift it is. It sets up everything quickly, and it doesn't take long for a kid to figure out the camera is bad and take advantage of it. Compared to the others in the show, I appreciated that. I like the idea of him using it to punish bullies, although it sort of ditches that soon once his sister is almost hurt and now that he's all fine. That felt a bit wasted. I dig Calhoun with Richard doing a good job in selling this man affected by the camera. He's fun and weird as well. There is wonky stuff there with him getting bad luck and then the thing in general, along with it causing bad stuff. So when it gives it away, his luck improves. That's a bit odd, as well as the whole gremlin thing. Yeah, that's done in a fun way, especially with the climax, but it's a weird pivot. It was likely done to stand out from other evil camera stories, so that did oddly work for me. There isn't much mood as it's quite swift, to a fault as far as that aspect goes. It's just a fun episode that's never boring. It has some wonky logic and doesn't take full advantage of the kids going to the dark stuff. Still, I enjoyed it again. It wasn't boring and did enough with the idea for the most of it. Not the tightest plot, but still a fun time. That's what she said.
All right, so Spongy seems like he enjoyed the episode too, and I think to start off with Spongy, I think he said that he prefers Curious Camera over Say Cheese and Die's book and episode, which I'm kind of shocked since Spongy quite enjoys Say Cheese and Die's episode, but that's one for we have one for Curious Camera. Bruce, we already know where you're at with this. I think you said quite openly that you prefer the book in the episode over Curious Camera. So we have 1-1. Ultimate Goosebumps Man, which one do you think is better?
Well, while I definitely liked Curious Camera and I thought it was really solid overall, my personal bias towards Say Cheese and Die and Goosebumps does get in the way, and I still do overall prefer Say Cheese and Die, just because I have more exposure to Goosebumps. And as I get more into Say, Are You Afraid of the Dark, that may change, but as of this moment, I prefer Say Cheese and Die still.
Okay. All right, that's perfectly fine. So we have 2 for Die, 1 for Curious Camera. Alejandro, which one do you prefer?
Say Cheese and Die. No questions asked. It is way more iconic, more recognizable. And though may not be as interesting and have more interesting characters, it still holds a very special place in my heart as a huge Goosebumps fan. And it is one of those stories that you tend to think about first when you think about Goosebumps. Besides like Night of the Living Dummy, Haunted Mask, it's always one of those first ones that come to mind. So obviously, Say Cheese and Die.
I mean, that Jacobus cover. I mean, look at that. Probably one of the best Goosebumps covers, most recognizable too. So definitely has some more recognition. I will say this from y'all's three's point of view that have said Say Cheese and Die. It seems like y'all are openly honest about like, hey, look, I'm a fan of Goosebumps. I'm kind of biased when I say this. I just prefer this because it's Goosebumps. Which is interesting because when you compare what me, BD, and Spongy kind of think, and I'm going to pass it over to BD because I already know what he's going to say. Which one do you think is better, BD?
So this is going to be an iconic moment so far in the podcast because so far Goosebumps has been winning nonstop for me. But take a picture, y'all. Are You Afraid the Dark wins? Because Curious Camera to me, I feel like is such a great plot for a story. Don't ignore them, bro. This is my time. Listen, man, this is a great plot, y'all. I understand Say Cheese and Die has great moments, has a lot of dark stuff. I love Say Cheese and Die. It's a 9 out of 10. But this story takes such a unique approach. And the fact that it adds so many layers to the characters, I'm sorry, y'all. This is stuff that Stein does rarely, right? This level of character growth, this level of depth within characters, he does that rarely. And Greg, I'm sorry, he doesn't have that. All right, the fact that you get to see this kid who's invisible to society get this power within his hands, abuse the power, figure it out, and then when he tries to get rid of it, he basically goes down this wild route. And on top of that, the fact that a younger sibling is a great younger sibling. She's not annoying. She's great. There's a lot of great stuff in here. I love Richard McMillan. I feel like he added a lot to the overall lore of the story, and I would have loved to seen what his experience was involving this camera. And yeah, I prefer it. Curious Camera, it wins this time. Perfection.
All right, so that's 2 for Curious Camera, 3 for Say Cheese and Die, which leaves it to me. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give it to Curious Camera and tie this, and we're going to have to go to a tiebreaker. Look, I said it before and I'll say it again. Curious Camera should have been what Say Cheese and Die, was in a book form. This is a better concept, better idea. It's more coherent. It has a better character. It's able to get to realistic emotions like Say Cheese and Die. If you blended the best of both worlds and maybe you had more violent stuff done with the camera, like Spongy said, if you're able to go more into the methodicalness of the character, trying to do revenge on some bullies, that would have made it very interesting and seeing all these bad, really terrible things happen to these bullies in the story. I think that would have been a more intriguing idea. And you probably could have blended maybe Spidey in there too for good measure if you really like his character more. But I think this is a more solid idea. Not taking anything away from Say Cheese and Die, though, I will say this. I think the Goosebumps episode is good, campy, fun, very easy to watch, classic, timeless episode. The book, very dark. It arguably is darker. If we're talking, shot for shot, which one has a darker tone? Easily Say Cheese will win. But I think in terms of just execution, I have to give it to Dark here. And I've tried to do that in the past and I lost, but I think I have a shot here to get it across. I think Dark did it better here. So that leads to a tiebreaker, and I think we all agreed on the tiebreaker. Instead of doing, for Goosebumps books and episodes, we always say which ones was scarier, right? Which one did it better. But for these, I think it would be fair because they're so similar, which one executed their own concepts better or which one had the better concept. And I guess we'll start off with Bruce. Which one do you think had a better executed concept or a better concept, whatever you want to throw into the ring here?
You know the answer. Say Cheese, in my opinion. I think this is tough saying because I know everyone else in this podcast is going to disagree. But the concept, and by the way, this came before, so let's just keep that in mind as well. That the concept of a camera, I want to point out what Ultimate Goosebumps fan says. It is such a normal day thing. It's great. And then it just does all this terrible stuff. Now, one of the main things I remember in Curious Camera was the kid, his shirt just turns like kind of dusty or like it's burnt or something. That's like when you compared that to basically a girl, I'm not even gonna say missing, I'm just gonna say dying, if you really think about it, or the car crash, and I could go on, but if you compare the two, I think it's creepier, a lot creepier actually, which I also think adds to it. I know you shouldn't take that factor into all standpoints, but I do, and I definitely have to say Cheese and Die here. I don't know.
So you value the scenes mostly then. You like the scenes of Say Cheese and Die more. You think those are better, like horror scenes.
Oh well, yeah, but I also love like the characters in Say Cheese and Die. Bird is like amazing, so I don't know what you guys mean there when you say you don't like him. I actually really like his character.
Oh, so you like Bird and Michael fighting in endless banter the whole book. Okay. All right. I guess that's fine, especially if you like Monster Blood books. You might like Conan and Kermit and Andy and Evan
Okay,
doing the same
come on.
Okay. All right. So okay, we'll let you have Say Cheese and Die. Let's move to Ultimate Goosebumps, man. What do you think has a better concept?
Well, as much as I adore Say Cheese and Die, I do admit that Curious Camera has a better concept and a better execution, I think. It's a tighter story. The main character, again, as someone who was bullied a lot growing up, I just relate to his character so much, and I've had a lot of those similar feelings when I was his age. And I just think that the way the camera operates makes a bit more sense and is less convoluted than Say Cheese and Die. I think that the school photographer is more interesting and more entertaining than Spidey, as iconic as Spidey is. Overall, I just think Curious Camera wins out in terms of the concept and story.
All right. So it's 1-1. Alejandro, which one do you think had a better concept?
Well, I would be lying if I didn't say it was Curious Camera. It's got a way more interesting camera with a lot more stuff going on around it. It has more power by the seams of it. It is not exactly cursed like Say Cheese and Dies is. And the camera in the book is just the episode is just a lot more interesting and more fun to watch as it gets, played out, especially if it's your first time watching, to see what the camera is capable of doing and what it really is. I like a lot of the characters more, like I said, so they're a lot more interesting with motive-wise, basically the lore of the camera-wise, basically everything overall. It's just a lot more fleshed out in the episode. And there's a lot more going on. So I'm going to have to give it to Curious Camera for concept.
Okay, well, concept wins out. All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut to Spongy. Spongy said he's going to throw Die a bone because I think he felt that Curious Camera was going to win. He said he likes the concept more in Die, but then I also think that he comes from a place where he thinks the Gremlin is kind of goofy, so it's fine, and I can understand that to a degree. But I know me and BD are kind of united on this. BD, go ahead and give what you have to say. Which one do you think has a better concept?
First, let me take a picture of Bruce getting the ultimate L. Just get that 4K HD. Put that up close. Smile for the camera, buddy. Yo, better concept goes to Curious Camera. First of all, again, the layers to the main character is much more in Curious Camera. And shout out to the Gooseman. The thing is about it is like, okay, yes, Say Cheese and Die has darker content. You have a car crash, you have concussions, you have people's, limbs being broken, stuff like that. Obviously, the ending is very clever. I would say I prefer the ending to Say Cheese and Die in this case. But the fact that you get this kid who's basically an underdog, gets bullied, as Ultimate mentioned, goes from being invisible to visible and having this level of power. And just the idea, again, I'm going to bring it up because I thought this is super dark. The fact that this kid basically has this school shooter scene where he's taking, marking down targets that he's going to use this camera on. That concept is darker than basically any underlying tone in Say Cheese and Die because that is something very realistic. And in this case, they replaced a certain weapon with another type of weapon in this, I think that's very clever. I think Spidey's more iconic. He's definitely more creepy, but the yearbook photographer, he's more of a realistic villain. I see Spidey as kind of like the Scooby-Doo type of villain. He has this ridiculous backstory. You love him because it's kind of cheesy but creepy at the same time. But the school photographer, that could be anybody. That could be any one of us. If we fall in love with our career and we end up with this terrible thing, this could happen to us. And I love the gremlin idea. The gremlin idea, I don't care what people say. That is a fantastic twist. It adds more layers to the story. It adds way more capabilities. And just the idea that this thing, again, is an electropath. You cannot defeat it. There is no specific way to beat it. And the main character, these guys are smart, bro. These are some smart characters. They put up a mirror in front of the camera, try to destroy it. Then the video recorder is out here trying to take them out. And my boy puts the hand through the seat cushion and starts operating the TV. Next level intellect with these main characters. And that adds, again, to more of a better story. And then, yeah, I just think it's better. The concept is a win here. And yeah, smile for the camera, Bruce.
Oh, yeah, and I have to end it off. In it to a 4-2. We have the first dark win. And that is Curious Camera wins out better concept. I have to say it. I think it's better executed. Like I've already mentioned it all. I don't have to repeat myself, but I just think that the overall package should have been what Say Cheese and Die was in the book. This should have been that book. And I'm kind of glad that this came after the book because I feel like if people want to come after this episode, hey, they just took from Say Cheese and Die. You can also say, hey, they took from it and improved it. They made it cooler. They made it better. They did something actually smart with it. I feel like it's realistic. If you give a kid a weapon that can make bad things happen, why not have them play with it a little bit? Greg did kind of play with it in Say Cheese and Die, but we all know that him and his friends were just constantly at disbelief with it the whole time. They kept questioning if it was actually happening. So I just think this is more direct. I think it's more fun. That's where I'm at. And Are You Afraid of the Dark finally wins. So current tally, we have 3 Goosebumps wins and 1 Are You Afraid of the Dark win. Bruce, I know you have something to say, bud. You're probably really hurt.
Okay, so I want to add on to that last part. Stop. Okay. So, what you just said is false because they're not only in disbelief, but Greg knows what's going on, especially during the birthday party scene where Sherry goes missing. Let me tell you, I'm going to fact check you right here, that he was like, no, I am not bringing it, and she kind of forced him to. And because they're like best friends, kids are kids, they're stupid. Shout out to any kids watching this video right now. He kind of just does it out of pure pressure. Now that is false, what you just said. So I want to actually give credit to Say Cheese and Die once again for being one of Stein's best works. An amazing Shakespeare level novel. Definitely recommend. And yeah, every single little individual crevice of each letter, it could be its own novel, honestly. And that's a quote from Goosebumps for Dummies.
So if Greg knew about the camera, like for sure what it's doing, even though it's never really expressed in the book, it's kind of vague the whole time. Why did he bring the camera to Bird's baseball game if he knew it was going to cause something bad to happen? Why did he bring the camera to Sherry's birthday? Like peer pressure? understandable, but like, wouldn't you like think like just say no and just not do it?
Also, no offense, but by the point of her birthday party, this thing is basically an established gun. Like they know it can hurt and kill somebody. So why would they be playing with it by that point? I don't care what peer pressure it is. I don't care if there's 15 kids telling Greg to use it. If at this point it's basically like a knife or a gun that they know it's gonna hurt or kill somebody, there should be no reason that he's even considering using it or considering bringing it because he knows the consequences, as opposed to Curious Camera, where the whole point is that the kid knows what it's capable of and he wants to use it for that reason.
The book wouldn't be the book.
That's a poor excuse.
All right, so that leads us into our discussion, and we're going to kind of try to make this quick. Both of these stories took inspiration from Twilight Zone. Both of these stories did. And it came from, what was the tale called? The Most Curious Camera.
Most Unusual Camera.
Most Unusual Camera. Okay, The Most Unusual Camera. And we all watched it, I think, besides Bruce, but that's all right. We all watched it, the old black and white episode from the classic show. And I have to say, sometimes when you have remakes or reimaginings, they can easily improve on the source material. And I feel like both Say Cheese and Die and The Tale of the Curious Camera improved on that old Twilight Zone tale tremendously. And I feel like people that want to come after Say Cheese and Die and Curious Camera say, oh, this is just a ripoff of The Most Unusual Camera. You're being really unfair to it, I feel, of those stories, because I watched the episode and I'm being honest, it's kind of dry. It's also poorly mishandled. It's kind of choppy. The ending is weird, doesn't make much sense. So you tell me, the concept, in case you don't know about this tale from Twilight Zone, it's about a couple. They are thieves. They go and rob a store. They think they got nothing, but they find this camera. And throughout the episode, they find out that this camera, whenever they take a photo, there's stuff that happens in the future with the camera. And as the story goes along, they learn from people they interact with that the camera only has, like, I think 10 photos it can possibly take. And once you get to the 10th, you're not allowed to take any more as the owner of the camera. And there's some weird players involved trying to get to the couple and take advantage. And the ending makes really not much sense with that. So I'm going to pass it over to the folks that have watched Twilight Zone, the Twilight Zone episode. BD Horror, what'd you think about The Most Unusual Camera?
So this is actually important because this is actually the very first Twilight Zone episode I ever watched, despite its popularity. I remember my neighbor, when I was like 7 years old, tried to get me to sit down and watch Twilight Zone. And being a 7-year-old, I didn't pay attention to a single second of it. I thought it was stupid. But now, I agree. This episode is a bit dry in a certain way. And maybe it's part of, the olden day TV show charm to it. But I kind of had a fun time with the episode. I don't think it's great. I think it's below, obviously, Say Cheese and Die and Curious Camera. But the one thing I have to commend about this episode, I like the set of characters, the fact that they are all thieves and crooked, because it adds kind of more to the irresponsibility of the usage of the camera. Because when you have kids in the future adaptations, you have the whole idea of, okay, Say Cheese and Die, they're naive kids. They're going to mishandle this object. You have Curious Camera, this underdog kid who can now become the one with all the power. Here, you have people who already have experience, have chosen this terrible lifestyle, have done bad things, and now they're abusing this thing that they basically stole until it eventually comes back and karma happens. I like that. Another thing I like about the episode, this is the most consistent camera in terms of its power, in terms of its capabilities. They added strict guidelines. There's only 10 pictures, and the camera will only show you 5 minutes into the future. So it can't show you any more, any less. It's very to the point. And I think that the fact that they established those guidelines up front and were consistent with it makes it more creative what they kind of do with it. Like right away, they're mishandling it. At first, they're scared. They think, okay, this is going to automatically hurt us. Maybe it's junk. You have the main character say, okay, this could be a trick camera, like a magic trick or something. And then eventually they figure out, you know what? I like the scene where he's basically like, you know what? No, we're gonna use this for humanity. We're gonna show this as our own invention and become famous off of it. And then right away he figures out from the the TV screen, the horse race, betting. No, we can make a lot of money out of this. Let's go back to our old nature and exploit it. And then it comes back and bites them. However, the part where this episode I felt really kind of fell off. The climax and ending, y'all. This climax and ending is very rushed. It could have been done a lot better. Um, I just have to say the fact that the waiter is French and he's conveniently French just so he can read the text on the camera is a little bit goofy to me. It works, but it's kind of a bit plot convenient. And then the whole falling out the window thing, I liked the initial scene, right, where both of them fell out because I thought that was well done. Then she falls off by tripping on a random wire, and it's the most exaggerated. Like she ran 15 feet before she fell. And then you have the villain in this case who falls off screen. You don't even know how he fell off. There's literally no indication, no reason he should have fell off, but it's just because he saw the picture and all of a sudden got jump scared. Like this is Five Nights at Freddy's. The picture just leaped out at him and then sent him tumbling back, and you don't even see any of the bodies. So that took it away from me. But I have to say, I like that it's the most consistent. I like the style of Twilight Zone. I've never seen Twilight Zone. I like the style. I like the fact that Rod Sterling interrupts at one point. He's got the swagger, the suit. He's kind of telling you what might happen. So yeah, I think it's a fun time. If you've never seen Twilight Zone, check this out first, and then work your way to better stuff. But those are my thoughts.
All right. And what'd you think about the episode Ultimate Goosebumps, man?
I wasn't a big fan of it. To be fair, I am not a big Twilight Zone fan or a fan of old black and white movies and shows. I just think they're very slow moving and tend to be kind of boring a lot of the time. And as someone who, as important as writing and acting and stuff is, I mainly go into movies and shows to be entertained because that's what they are. It's entertainment. And so that's mainly what I like to judge something on. And if it's not entertaining, then I'm just not going to really care about it much. And I just think this episode was just really dull. There wasn't much happening. The characters were intentionally unlikable, but it doesn't mean they were unlikable any less. And there was just a lot of dumb things they did with it, with the ending and with just kind of the motives I just wasn't a big fan of. So that's it, really.
All right, all right. And you want to read off Spongy for us, Beatty, and what he said about not Curious Camera, but the most unusual camera?
Yeah, let me take a look.
I always get that confused.
All right, so it says bonus. My thoughts on the most unusual camera. It's a typical setup with bad guys using a thing and paying the price, but it works all right. The criminals are fun, even if it takes a bit to them really using the camera, but thankfully the camera comes into play quickly. The main flaw is the ending. This is pretty much universally between all of us. The main flaw is the ending, which is really rushed and dumb. Pretty funny, yet it clearly wasn't meant to be. It doesn't make any sense why this all happens, and the final note feels like a shrug. I get that they were going to pay the price somehow, but it ends up feeling forced. At least it's still fun-ish, which is more than I can say for some, and it works better than that damn slot machine one, lol. So overall, a messy ending to an otherwise fine episode. At least it has no fat shaming in it. And I have to agree with a lot of his thoughts. I thought, it is still fun to a degree.
Yeah, I think it's still fun too, personally. It's just, I've seen many Twilight Zone episodes, and I usually forget about this one until people want to throw out there, oh, this inspired Goosebumps. And I'm like, yeah, but I think the Goosebumps is better. I think Are You Afraid of the Dark is better. So that's pretty much where I'm at with it. I know Bruce didn't watch the episode, but you got something to say, Bruce?
Yeah, I actually want to add to what Completionist says here with how people over time have been like, Goosebumps, they took from the Twilight Zone with like things like Slappy, I know was in some dummy related episode, but it's like, okay, looking at the bigger picture, Slappy, if he even takes too much inspiration, which he obviously does a little bit, but there was movies before it like Magic, which is basically, with Anthony Hopkins, I forgot, but you got that. You got the obvious one, even though it isn't a dummy, but Child's Play is pretty similar in some aspects. you've also had, like you guys just said, Say Cheese and Die. I've always heard of this Twilight episode. What is it called again? Unusual Camera. I think people go, oh, they kind of took the concept and just put their own spin on it. Not really. They basically take what the I don't really know how to put it in words, but they take what the like main thing is and then just completely change everything else. And I've watched some Twilight episodes. I'm not a massive fan of it, although I do love like old monster movies like Frankenstein or Night of the Living Dead, but I still think like I don't think I've watched any of the ones that people compare to Goosebumps, but I think it's stupid to just go, oh, this thing that came way, way, way before it is somehow just so similar, because there's no way that Stein must have probably. My biggest thing is, have you ever heard a song that sounds similar to another song?
Yeah, like sampling songs and stuff like that. They'll take like a similar beat, or in fact the same exact beat, and then make a whole new song out of it.
I don't want to I don't want to draw this out, but like, as a massive like metal music fan, when Metallica dropped their new album, there was a song on it that reminded me a lot of an Exodus song, and I was like, wait a minute, so this really big band is taking from like a lot littler of one. I feel like that's the same case here, where it's like, that feels more like it's the same like music for the most part, but there's obvious changes. And what I think is Metallica, because the Exodus song came in like the 80s, this was like a new thing just this year. I think Metallica must have heard it because they are fans of the band. They've even admitted it. And then they probably just didn't think about it for so long. And then one of the guitar players was like, oh, I like that, you know. But I feel like that's kind of what Stein does here, where let's say as a kid he was like, oh yeah, I remember Unusual Camera. And then he was like, well, he didn't remember, but he's like, I feel like I remember something like that, but that was so cool. And then he wants to actually do the same thing, except you can obviously tell there's a lot of differences.
Do you know the origin story behind Say Cheese and Die's title? Stein was walking his dog, and he's like, oh, came up with the title, Say Cheese and Die. I got to turn that into a book. And that's literally how he explained where Say Cheese and Die came from. So I always thought that was cool. BD, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say two things. First thing I was gonna say is like I agree with Minnesota. And it's for two reasons. One, because first of all, you have to take into consideration that Twilight Zone is an adult show. It's meant to be like it's kind of like higher intellectual, trippy kind of thing. And Say Cheese and Die and Curious Camera's adaptations are for a completely different demographic. So the fact that people will immediately compare it to this adult version, well, the whole point is to bring this medium into something for kids and make it more interesting to them. So it's still a brand new demographic that they're catering to. So it's not like, oh, let's say Creep Show, for example. Like let's say Creep Show takes from, this adult show, Twilight Zone, and brings it into another adult medium. Well, then it feels even more like copying in that case. No, this is for a brand new demographic, for kids to experience this great idea in a brand new medium. And second thing, just to talk about adult horror, there's this really underground author that a lot of you guys may not know. His name is Stephen King, super unknown. He inspires thousands of adult authors. Everybody's read Stephen King the same way every kid's horror person has read Goosebumps. That does not take credit away from their stories. There's a lot of people who have made stories that are similar to Stephen King's, and they do better jobs than it. They make it a lot better. They make it a much more greater concept. People get inspired all the time.
The Haunted Car and Christine.
There you go. And on top of that, Completionist brought this up. People get inspired by everything. You guys want to know the story behind The Mummy Walks? It came from a Stein airport story. He was in an airport, and when he was on the plane, he basically thought about something that the kid went through in the book. Imagining a kid going through that. So people get inspired by everything. That doesn't mean you have to discredit people. That doesn't mean you have to come up with some brand new idea that was never thought of before. People can turn things into something better, and music is a great example. So shout out to Minnesota. That was a great example for how people can change art into different forms of stuff that people can enjoy.
Yeah, kind of going to the music angle as well. Like I myself am a musician, and like there's a very common stigma with musicians called the four chords of doom that a lot of songs use. And it's one of those things where it's like a lot of songs use these chords, but they're not trying to necessarily copy another song. It's just that these chords are so mainstream and popular, and they work so well in music that they're just used a lot.
And we're kind of getting to like tropes. Like there's so many borrowed tropes carrying over. Like slasher movies had the biggest subgenre of horror with just every movie has the same tropes. You have the final girl, you have the supernatural slasher guy that can't be taken down by normal means. You have egregious body count. You have the people who do drugs and do, the nasty, biting the dust. It's tropes at the end of the day, and horror is a big, big, big genre that borrows tropes from each other. Now, when we're talking about concepts of a camera, yeah, you can have a camera that does evil futures or predicts bad futures. Oh, that alone does not mean you're ripping it off. You're just ripping off, I guess, the concept of the item itself. But you're doing something, making the story fresh with new characters, different stipulations, different point of views, and different outcomes. So that's not really a ripoff to me. You're just kind of playing on a similar idea. And in turn, you end up creating smaller subgenres out of that. So we have a kids horror camera subgenre out of this because there's many authors and creators doing evil camera stories. So there's room for it all. And I feel like people want to, compare and put things into boxes all the time and cast the first stone. But like I said, I just think people are unfair to kids horror, and kids horror is an important medium in my opinion, because as a massive horror fan, without kids horror, I never would have got into adult horror. So, yeah, great podcast, guys. So that wraps up episode 5. We have another installment planned. We're actually going to take a small detour. Every 5 episodes, we're going to take a break from Goosebumps and try something else within the kids' horror medium. And we decided to do Haunting Hour versus Are You Afraid of the Dark this time because Goosebumps doesn't really have a story like these. So we picked 2 that felt similar, and we chose Mascot, the iconic episode from Haunting Hour, to face off against a later revival season episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark called The Tale of Jake the Snake. We are dealing with gymnasium basement horror and creatures, mascots that come out of those basements. So stay tuned for that, especially if you're a fan of Haunting Hour. You don't want to miss it. I want to give a special thanks to Spongy444. He wasn't able to make the podcast due to some personal reasons, but we appreciate you contributing. Alex isn't here, Goosebumps for Dummies. I'm going to link all these folks down in the description and in the comment section of this video. Please go check out BD Horror. Go check out Minnesota Goosebumps Fan. And please check out one of our new panelists, Ultimate Goosebumps Man's channel. I'll have all their information down at the bottom. And we hope to see you all next time. Take care and have a great night.
Bump's gonna goose ya.
Say cheese.
Say cheese.